Hi everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charger 360, telling the stories of the University of New Haven. I'm J.W. Stewart, joined by Bruce Barber. Bruce, how you doing?
This is a personal joy, J-Dub, because our guest today, we first crossed paths during the Smith and Barber era.
Really?
On WPLR. Yes, I ended up at the University of New Haven, and Mike Lawlor ended up here at the University of New Haven, and what a joy it is to have you.
It's great to be here.
Mike, welcome to the show. Mike is the Associate Professor of Criminal Justice and Acting Associate Dean of our Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice and Forensic Science. Before we get into your background and your path here, I got to get your best Bruce Barber story from all those years. How many interviews did you do with this guy on morning radio?
Well, I couldn't count them up, but
yeah, you were on a lot.
I was on quite a few times. This was like the 90s, I think,
right.
the 1990s.
Oh, yes.
And I remember several times having to drive over to the studio where it was on Dixwell Avenue, right?
Yep, Dixwell and Putnam.
And each and every time it was just to humiliate me. And there was plenty of fodder for that. But you know how politicians are treated on morning talk show radio.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Yeah, but it was okay.
But you kept coming back.
Yeah, well, I mean, a friend of mine in politics once said that, you know, you might as well just answer every question truthfully because nobody believes you anyways, and you'll never get caught in a lie. So
he's the unicorn. He was the one honest politician. How did that happen?
So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your background and your time in politics and how you ended up here at UNH.
Yeah, so I grew up in East Haven, and my first exposure to the University of New Haven, believe it or not, when I was a junior in high school, I played football in the fall, and then in February I broke my leg really badly and ended up in the hospital for a month, and that turned into like 6 months of cast and a lot of drama going on there, and so I missed an entire like semester of high school, and I wanted to play football again, and the coach at the time, Frank Crisafi, said, Mike, you know, we could redshirt you and you can come back another year. And I agreed to do it. So I came back in the fall, you know, after my class graduated. I took classes at East Haven in the fall, but in the spring there was a program called the Outstanding High School Senior Program here at the University of New Haven. So I got to come here for a semester for free.
Wow.
Got 15 credits and was able to transfer those up to UConn, which is where I attended 4 years. And so that was my first exposure, and the campus was so much different back then. I mean, you can just imagine, I think 60% of what's here now wasn't here then. But I always had a special place for this experience because I was very grateful for what I was able to do there. And then in 1995, I was in the legislature. You know, I'd been a prosecutor before I ran for the legislature, but then I went into private practice, which I really kind of hated, and was kind of flailing around for something different to do instead of being a lawyer. And I was offered a job as a, practitioner in residence here in 1995, actually.
Wow.
And I've been teaching here ever since, first as a PIR, and then they offered me a tenure track faculty position. To my surprise, I didn't seek it out, and then I got tenure, and then I got a promotion to associate professor, and then, and all this time I was still in the legislature, because it's a part-time job in Connecticut. And then when Governor Malloy asked me to come work for him in 2011, I essentially got a leave of absence from here. So I was away for 8 years, still taught a course every year, and then came back after Malloy left office, and the rest is history. So, but it's, you know, there's something very special about this place. You know, many of the students here are first in their family ever to even go to college. And in the Lee College, we focus on public safety, public service type jobs. And it's so interesting for me to work with the young people who are aspiring to be police officers or probation officers or CIA agents or whatever, because, you know, I feel very strongly about the importance of the criminal justice system, which has lots of flaws for sure, but the only way to really change that is to give the best possible education and perspective to young people thinking of going into that line of work. And so it's a great experience. And
wow.
Here I am, what is it, 30 years later, I'm still at it.
That's incredible. We're so lucky to have you. And so what was interesting for me was having had you on the Smith and Barber show, then seeing you were doing some amazing things. You did stuff that was affecting actual change. How's that for a politician? But what would you say is the thing you're most proud of from your time in politics?
Yeah, so it would be hard to pick one of two things, right? So most of my work was in criminal justice policy, right? And so a lot of things happened there. Things that people said would never happen, like, for example, the abolition of the death penalty. I can remember some prosecutors like laughing at us when we proposed bills to abolish it. You'll never get to do that. Well, we did it. and you know, there's a litany of things that took place over my 24 years in the legislature on criminal justice topics. And then the other big topic, of course, is marriage equality and anti-discrimination based on sexual orientation and stuff like that. And you know, one of the courses I still teach now, the Uncommon course here, which we require of all first-year Lee College students, you know, we talk about, it's not DEI for sure, but it's just an opportunity for students to think, in many cases for the first time, about going into public service and having to deal with people who are not like them in all different ways, right? And we do this very interesting, we call it the carousel, where each of us, you know, there's 8 sections that meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the 8 of us who teach those 8 sections, we sort of rotate, and so we spend a week in each of the other classes. And we do a unique presentation, and mine is called Communists, Criminals, and Queers. And because, you know, when I was in college and grad school, I studied Soviet area studies and, you know, spent a lot of time over there. And, you know, my only time ever being incarcerated actually was in Poland in 1980. I was taking photos of people standing in a meat line, and the cops didn't think that was such a good idea. But anyway, but it's, you know, it's stuff like that, and I talk about that, and most young people these days have no concept of the Cold War or anything like that. And talk about some examples of criminal justice stuff, and then ultimately about the evolution from, let's say, the early 1990s up until now. Because I think young people today, to them, the gay stuff is like no big deal, right? But one of the stories I have to tell them is, you know, it was 2006, and I was kind of out to my family and friends and stuff, but not, you know, it's East Haven's kind of like blue collar, very Catholic and stuff. And so I wasn't out like that. And then I got a call from a newspaper reporter in Stamford who was talking to myself and Andrew McDonald, who was the other chairman of the Judiciary Committee, who's also gay, right? And the reporter was asking me about the election that was coming up the following week in where gay marriage was a hot topic, right? We had already done civil unions here, the big controversy, we're also gonna do gay marriage, and you know, nationally this was a big deal. And so the reporter says to me, so Senator McDonald is gay, are you gay? And I said, well, yeah, and okay, fine. And next morning in the Stamford paper, it said, blah, 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 Andrew McDonald, comma, Mike Lawlor, both of whom are gay, comma, blah. And then Greg Ladke, who was a reporter for the Register, calls me up. He says, Mike, I see you came out in the paper. And I go, what are you talking about, Greg? He said, well, it says you're gay. So I am gay, you know that, Greg. He goes, yeah, but I respect your privacy and stuff. And he said, but I got to write an article about it. And this is like the Friday before the Tuesday election. And I was freaking out. And as a result, I had to call all my supporters in East Haven, typically older people who were active in policy, you know, just so you know, there's gonna be an article in the paper tomorrow that says I'm gay. And so the article came out, the word gay was not in the headline, I was very happy about that. And, but people didn't care, right? But it was, and what I try and convey to students is how traumatic that was that night, having to get on the phone and call people, because you had no, and even though they knew me very well, you know, I was like a stereotypical straight guy, right? I was captain of the football team, king of the prom, and all that stuff. But I was wondering, would they change their opinion about me just finding out this fact? And it didn't happen, thank God. So anyway, so, but you know, at the end of the day, we did manage to pass civil unions, and we kind of teed it up for the state Supreme Court to rule that you can't have separate but equal, and it worked out very well.
Wow,
so,
yeah,
Amazing.
Now,
some of it's at risk now, unfortunately, not here in Connecticut, but nationally. But still, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward.
That's incredible.
Connecticut was one of the first states to legalize gay marriage.
So Connecticut was the first state to do civil unions without a court telling us we had to do it. And we were also the first state to pass a law providing marriage equality. Massachusetts had already done it because the Supreme Court there had ruled it. And the same thing happened here in Connecticut, but right after that, when the legislative session started the following year, in 2009, the legislature actually codified that decision, so we gave our stamp of approval. And Governor Rell, former Governor Rell, who recently passed away, a Republican, not that there's anything wrong with that, she signed it into law. And so she was the first governor in the country to sign a marriage equality bill into law.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Lambda Legal recently honored you with an award recognizing you for your lifetime of work on behalf of all the rights of the LGBTQ plus community. What was that moment like for you, Mike?
Well, it was very cool. It was actually the Sunday following the presidential election. And so it was emotional in a bunch of different ways, mainly because, what I said that day, I said, I had been in 13 separate elections in East Haven, and I always believed going into election night, you better have at least 2 speeches in your head, one if you win, one if you lose, because, nothing worse than a sore loser, right? And I always did. And so as I was trying to think what I would say at this event, before the election took place, I have to have, there's 2 speeches. And unfortunately, I had to give the other one. But what I was trying to encourage people is to understand that this is always sort of a fight, for not just for gays and stuff, but everybody who kind of feels ostracized a bit. And I think the tone of the whole event was very optimistic. We're going to have to fight, but we'll win because gays always win. I'm just saying. and so it was emotional like that. But nonetheless, it was a great honor, and a lot of people I knew were there. And Dean Schroeder, who I work for over in the Lee College, was there. Lorenzo Boyd, who's one of my great friends, is also a professor.
Awesome.
It was good to have some folks there.
Yeah, and I just feel like our students are so lucky here because we do have faculty that are so accomplished, and we all really care, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, and the Lee College is so highly regarded, but we like to give folks a chance to tell people who are considering coming here, what are the things that separates the University of New Haven. So in your experience, what is it, besides being awesome, what is it that makes our program in criminal justice and forensic science special?
Well, let's just start with the scale of the program to begin with. Many colleges have a CJ program or a forensics program, but very few have anything close to ours in terms of number of full-time faculty, practitioners and residents, and adjuncts. We have adjuncts here. The head of the state police is an adjunct here. We have fire chiefs, and we have real world people. Even our full-time faculty, it's half people who are coming here after a career in the real world. Others are true academics, which is you have to have that. And so I think you're going to get exposed to perspectives, real world perspectives that you might not get somewhere else where it's just purely people with PhDs. Not there's anything wrong with that either, but I'm just saying, anyway, it's a little different like that. And the other thing is the network that we have for example, internships for our students. They all have to do internships, and you'd have a hard time finding a spot anywhere in public safety world where there weren't UNH grads there in leadership positions. And so it makes it very easy for us to put people into internships so they can test drive the career they think they might want to go into and have no problem getting there and being connected to it. Just for example, I think it was last year, half of the United States Secret Service recruits nationally came from the University of New Haven.
Wow. Of course, we've got Bobby McDonald.
We do.
Well,
And all you have to do is,
Right.
you tell Bobby, you need something done. He just talks into his sleeve and something happens.
Exactly. But it's stuff like that that's really unique. And we tend to keep the class sizes very small here. The contact with faculty is very direct. And, you know, it's just a joy. And you know, because, you know, I've had a odd career, a little bit of everything in terms of criminal justice stuff. I like to think that I am helping to take my experiences, my expertise, and helping to groom, let's just say, the next generation of public safety folks. And you know, another role I have these days, I'm on the New Haven Board of Police Commissioners, and one of the things we do is we interview every single candidate to be a cop in New Haven, because we have to vote on them. And recently, last couple of years, given all the drama that took place in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and stuff, the people that are pursuing a career in law enforcement tend to be a little bit older, many people of color, a lot of women, many people born outside the United States. You know, it's rare to find like a white guy like me wants to be a cop, at least in New Haven. But to me, and what these people say during the interviews is like, why do you want to be a cop? And they say, you know, I see all this stuff on the news, and I really want to be part of winning back the trust of the community. They say that stuff. Wow. I don't think, you know, I don't think it was scripted. I think they seem very sincere, and I like to think that, you know, we are playing a role here in sort of developing future law enforcement leaders or prosecutors or whatever, and you know, and I actually see the results. You know, all the senior command at the New Haven Police Department have degrees from our place, and they're the ones who are sort of leading the charge. So that, to me, if I were, well, I am a parent. I have a 16-year-old son, and he's more interested in music than this stuff.
Good for him.
Yeah, I know. But if I had a kid who was even remotely interested in this general area, you know, this is the place to be. Seriously, this is the place to be.
Wow, I feel more encouraged than I have in quite some time.
That's good.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, we are so lucky to have you here.
I'm lucky to be here. The place has been very good to me. Yeah,
awesome.
Mike Lawlor, our Associate Professor of Criminal Justice and Acting Associate Dean for the Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice and Forensic Science. Mike, thanks for being here on Charger 360.
Sure, anytime.
And you got here and Bruce didn't insult you, so that's a change from the good old days.
Times have changed.
One of the takeaways from politics, you get a very thick skin.
Yeah.
You'd have a hard time getting me upset.
He visited Smith & Barber and
Yep.
lived to tell the story.
Toughened him up to deal with everything else in life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. For Mike and for Bruce, I'm J-Dub. Thanks for watching Charger 360, telling the stories of the University of New Haven. If you'd like to be on the show, reach out to Bruce and I. You can email Bruce at bbarber@newhaven.edu or yours truly at jstewart@newhaven.edu. Thanks for watching Charger 360. We'll see you next time, everybody.